Welcome to this online version of the Unitarian Universalist Church of the South Hills, also known as Sunnyhill. Our mission here is to create a more just and compassionate community within and beyond our walls. My name is Mary Jo Hennessy, and I serve as a worship associate for this congregation. If you are a newcomer or a visitor to our congregation, please let us know you're here by posting a message on our Facebook feed or our YouTube feed, or you can contact our membership director, Bethany Thornton, at sunnyhillmembership@gmail.com. We would love to let you know how you can connect with our congregation even during this time when our building is closed. Our opening words this morning were written by Carl Seberg. Let there be joy in our coming together this morning. Let there be truth heard in the words we speak and the songs we sing. Let there be help and healing for our disharmony and despair. Let there be silence for the voice within us and beyond us. Let there be joy in our coming together. Welcome once again to this online service.
Please join us in saying the words for lighting our chalice.
May the light of truth illumine our minds. May the spark of love set our hearts on fire. May the flame of freedom burn brightly within us, now and always.
Once there was an emperor who needed a new set of clothes to wear in the grand parade. He called two of his finest cloth weavers in to order one. They looked at each other and decided, this will be a chance to make a little extra money. "Oh, Emperor," one said, "we've invented the most marvelous cloth. It'll cost you a little extra, but it's magic. It's so magic that people can't see it if they're foolish or if they're lazy or if they're not so good at their jobs. So not only will your majesty look your absolute royal best, you'll be able to tell immediately who should be fired from their jobs. The emperor thought, I've been wondering who those people are. I'll take it, he said. Off went the weavers to work, but they were awfully slow. The emperor sent in one of his wisest advisors to check on their progress. When he got there, he saw two of them doing nothing at all. It looked like they were waving their hands back and forth in front of the loom, but there was no cloth coming out. He didn't want the emperor to think that he was foolish, or lazy, or not good at his job, so he rushed back and said, "It's magnificent. You'll love it." Finally, the day arrived, and the weavers brought in the suit for the emperor to try on. I have it here in this bag. You want to look? Right? It's pretty great, isn't it? Well, the emperor thought the same thing. He felt a wave of panic. Oh no, am I one of the foolish, lazy people? He couldn't say that, so he asked them to help him put it on. He felt embarrassed when he looked in the mirror, because it looked like he was wearing nothing at all. But the weavers pulled here and creased there, and then they oohed and ahed and admired how wonderful it looked on him. Then it was time for the grand parade and the emperor's big entrance. Everyone cheered loudly for the acrobats and the dancers and the horses. Then out came the emperor, completely naked. Everyone got really quiet. Then someone said, "Huzzah for the emperor," and another person said, "He looks like a new man." But one little boy said, "He's not wearing any clothes," and the parade stopped. What do you think happened after that? Did everyone realize that there were no new clothes and the emperor felt foolish after all? Or were they all, including the emperor, convinced that it actually existed and that they were all lazy and foolish and just couldn't see it? I think what happened is that the little boy was the only one brave enough to speak the truth of what he saw. If everyone else along the way was honest, it would have saved the emperor from a really embarrassing experience. You see, you don't know what's going to happen when you tell the truth. That's why it's a brave thing to do, but it's always important to speak up.
Kyrie Each week at this time in the service, we share joys and sorrows that have been submitted by members of the congregation. We share the things that we are celebrating as well as the things that we're mourning, so they do not need to be held alone. Joys and sorrows can be submitted online from our website or through a link on our Beat newsletter. There were no joys or sorrows submitted this week, but we encourage you to share them with us in the coming week, as it can be an important way of staying connected, especially during this time when our building remains closed. Please join me in the spirit of meditation and prayer. Beyond and beneath the rumbling and roaring, beyond and beneath the chaos and cacophony, beyond and beneath the storms and sorrows, a still small voice calls us to listen, calls us to pause and be still, calls us to slow down and ease up. Let us take a moment of stillness, a moment of silence, to listen simply and intently to what waits below the din and discord of everyday life. When we are still enough, when we allow peaceful silence to enter our noisy lives, when we take a moment to stop doing and simply be, we may hear a clear, calming voice singing a comforting song that has been with us all along. May we listen to the voice of stillness, and may our best and truest selves emerge, humming, sighing, singing. Amen.
Voice still and small, deep inside all, I hear you call, singing. In dark and rain, sorrow and pain, still you remain, singing. Calming my fears, quenching my tears, through all the years, singing.
During the early days and weeks of the pandemic, I noticed an encouraging phenomenon. People in my neighborhood were getting out of their houses and walking around more than they'd done before. Being stuck at home led us and our neighbors to get reacquainted with our immediate surroundings. And as people walked around the neighborhood, there were more interactions among neighbors than there had been prior to the pandemic. More conversations were taking place, albeit from a safe distance rather than up close and personal. This trend was heartening. It gave me hope that something good might arise amid all the pain and panic related to the pandemic. In fact, I still feel closer to my neighbors than I did 6 or 7 months ago, and I'm generally more likely to strike up conversations with those who live nearby than I was pre-COVID. But lately, another neighborhood phenomenon has emerged over the past couple of months. I think of it as the battle of the yard signs. On one side of our house, 2 Trump-Pence yard signs sprouted from the ground a few weeks ago. On the other side of our house, a Biden-Harris sign appeared around the same time, along with signs supporting Conor Lamb and Pam Iovino. Across the street, another neighbor put up the now familiar rainbow-themed "Love is Love, Black Lives Matter, Science is Real," and so on sign. A few doors down, another neighbor's yard features an "Open Our Schools" sign, along with signs for several local political candidates who have rather disturbingly chosen red and black color schemes that are reminiscent of flags and signs from Nazi Germany in the 1930s and 40s. Our own yard, as you might expect, features Sunnyhill's own "I Vote My UU Values" sign, along with the sign for our presidential candidate of choice, not to mention a huge Black Lives Matter flag that flies over our front door. Many of you have probably experienced feelings similar to mine as you've observed the battle of the yard signs in your own neighborhoods. It's a mix of profound disappointment and even disgust with certain neighbors, along with a newfound sense of solidarity with other neighbors. The friendlier, more neighborly trend of 6 months ago has not disappeared altogether, but the atmosphere on our block has certainly changed. There's a tension that exists that may have been there before, but was more deeply buried. Now, for better or worse, it's all out in the open for all the world to see, the very real divisions and deep rifts that exist not only on our block, but throughout our entire nation. I've found myself wondering lately if it might be possible to change the minds of any of my neighbors with whom I have profound political differences. Can the newfound closeness that we started to develop be leveraged as a means of getting them to rethink their social and political stances? I honestly don't know the answer to that question. It's possible, at least in theory, that such conversations among neighbors could, over time, soften people's positions on social policies and politics. After all, there are famous examples of former KKK members who have become racial justice advocates, and former pig farmers who have transformed into animal rights activists. On the other hand, there are only 23 days between now and Election Day, and I have no illusions about my powers of persuasion over people whose social and political stances are so radically different from my own. I'm not going to be able to change their minds between now and then, no matter how well constructed my arguments might be, and no matter how much the facts might be on my side. And here's an interesting thing about trying to change people's minds using fact-based arguments. It does not work. As professor and researcher Pete Ditto puts it, people think they think like scientists, but most of us first decide what we believe and then select the facts that support those beliefs. So when we hear arguments that don't align with our beliefs, we tend to disregard them. What tends to soften people's thinking and eventually lead to changing minds is a process that involves at least 3 components: contact, trust, and storytelling. There must first of all be contact between people on different sides of the rift if it is to be bridged. You don't have to become best friends with those who disagree with you, but if you really want to engage in the work of changing minds, and as I'll mention later, this is not work that everyone should engage in, but if you can engage in this work, you first of all need to establish contact with those others somehow. Second, some level of trust must exist if these conversations are to be at all fruitful. Trust is something that requires shared experience and a certain amount of time. There's so much distrust in the world right now that trust is even harder to build than usual, but it's a necessary prerequisite for challenging conversations. Third, while sharing facts doesn't change minds, sharing stories sometimes does. People respond to personal narratives, not statistics or scientific evidence. Telling your own story honestly and openly can make much more of an impact than trying to argue with someone through facts and cold, hard reasoning. So those 3 things are important to keep in mind if you are in a position to engage in conversation across lines of difference. But as I mentioned, such conversations are not always possible, and they're not always desirable either. While it is necessary and important for those of us who enjoy a certain amount of privilege to reach out across lines of difference, we must not do so in a way that causes further harm, and we must not expect those among us who are actively harmed by oppressive attitudes, actions, and policies to reach out to those who would do them even further harm, thereby perpetuating the cycle of harm and injustice. We often cite polarization as something that needs to be changed in our society. It isn't fair or just to achieve depolarization at the expense of those who are oppressed or marginalized, however. We have to find a better way. And that better way starts with listening to and acting with the people who have been marginalized and oppressed. Those of us with any amount of privilege at all need to act in solidarity with those who are less privileged and more at risk. We cannot condone or leave unchallenged attitudes, actions, and policies which will result in harm. What I'm talking about is a daunting and perhaps at this particular moment in time, insurmountable challenge. On one hand, we cannot abandon our most deeply held values, nor can we abandon those who are most vulnerable and most harmed by the politics of hate and fear and the associated behaviors. On the other hand, our situation and the current tension among neighbors is not likely to change unless people's hearts and minds start to change at least a little as a result of interactions across lines of difference. The good news, if there is good news, is that we don't need to change everyone's mind. As activist and author Daniel Hunter says, campaigns don't succeed by getting everyone to agree with us. In fact, in most successful campaigns, the active opposition don't change their minds, despite our best efforts. Rather, support for their position is pulled away by shifting people who are passive or neutral one step in our direction. So we don't need to convince everyone to become active allies to achieve our goals. Hunter continues, take the abolitionist movement against slavery in this country as an example. If you add up every petition signed, every meeting, every public action, not even 1% of the population were active allies of the movement. Yet it was successful. Put differently, studies show that it may take only 3.5% of the population engaged in sustained nonviolent resistance to topple brutal dictators. Here's the bottom line for me with regard to our neighborhood yard sign wars. I'm not going to spend the next few weeks trying to persuade my Trump-supporting neighbors to change their minds. I will, however, be ready to engage with people when I sense an openness to real conversation, keeping in mind those key concepts of contact, trust, and storytelling. At the same time, I will not throw oppressed and marginalized people under the bus in these conversations. I will stand up for my values and will advocate for those who are most harmed by regressive policies and bigoted attitudes and behaviors. I will keep in mind that most successful liberation movements have been the result of faithful effort over the course of many years. As historian Howard Zinn said, the struggle for justice should never be abandoned because of the apparent overwhelming power of those who have the guns and the money and who seem invincible in their determination to hold on to it. That apparent power has again and again proved vulnerable to moral fervor, determination, unity, organization, sacrifice, wit, ingenuity, courage, and patience. Friends, whatever happens on November 3rd, there is still a long, hard struggle before us. We need to find hope even in small actions. That postcard reminding someone to vote or that phone call to an elected official may not seem like much in and of itself and may not move the needle very far. But each time we take action, no matter how large or small, we demonstrate that we are the kind of people who get involved and stay involved, the kind of people who choose action over despair, the kind of people who will always work to do what is right. Over the next few weeks and in the months to come, please remember three things which I've said before and will say again. First, take care of yourselves. Remember when you can to get good food, good sleep, and a little bit of exercise and relaxation. If you don't take care of yourself, you will not be able to do any good for anyone. Second, find hope through action. Each right action we take makes a difference, and it helps transform us into the people we want to become. Third, reach out to other people when you need support. The world feels harsh and unfriendly right now amid the yard signs and on-air screaming matches. But you are not alone. And we are going to need each other to survive. For me, our current era is not so much about winning debates and changing minds, as it is about staying the course and speaking out. Prolonged inaction is not an option. Indifference is not an option. Giving up is not an option. Solidarity, courage, and patience are required if we're to have any hope of moving forward. I hope and pray as we move through the next weeks that we will take care of ourselves, that we will find hope through action, and that we will continue to reach out to each other, cultivating solidarity, courage, and patience in everything we do. May it be so. Amen.
go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land where I'm bound. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land where I'm bound. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land where I'm bound. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land where I'm bound. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land where I'm bound. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land where I'm bound. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound.
We'll now give and receive our morning offering. We do not have a designated beneficiary for today's offering, so any non-pledge income will go toward our general operating budget. But we will continue to have special offerings in the weeks to come as we identify and try to help meet pressing needs in the larger community. If you'd like to make a donation via our online giving system, you can do so in one of two ways. You can go to sunnyhill.org and scroll down and look to the right and see the big green button that says Online Giving, and then follow the instructions. Or you can text us at 412-324-3130. Just hit the buttons on your smartphone and follow the instructions. And you can also always mail a check if you prefer, and you can find our mailing address again on our website, sunnyhill.org. Scroll to the bottom and it's down with the contact information. And as always, thank you always for your generosity.
Please join us in saying the words to extinguish our chalice.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Our closing words were written by Kendall Gibbons. There is finally one thing required of us, and that is to take life whole, the sunlight and shadows together, to live the life that is given us with courage and humor and truth. We have such a little moment out of the vastness of time for all our wondering and loving. Therefore, let there be no half-heartedness. Rather, let the soul be ardent in its pain, in its yearning, and in its praise. Then shall peace enfold our days, and glory shall not fade from our lives. Go in peace.